Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's rendition of Joker and the world that encapsulates him is one that we have never seen before in all of cinema, and I feel that it is a genuine turning point for the future of the DC movie franchise and will likely inspire all sorts of future filmmakers and whatever IPs they manage to hold too. As is my normal routine these days, once a new film comes out, I jump right on them at the soonest opportunity at my local cinema, and one weekend later I have a video to tell all about my thoughts and feelings. Half review, half just gushing about the whole experience. We'll be going into quite a bit of detail, so beware of spoilers. So first, let's talk about the general world of Joker. While we've seen Gotham in several different representations, this Joker takes things one step further by pulling back the world not just from the generic connected superworld of prior DC films, but also back a couple decades, back to the early 80s. During these times, Batman is but a quiet child yet to have another telling of his origin story, and despite a whole new generation of people forming the world, problems still arrive from every facet of Gotham. From the poor being crushed under the weight of dysfunctional public services and heaps of garbage, to the superheated climate of the political world. It's a world provoking the perturbed to rise up in a society that hasn't yet grasped the idea of being an accepting community. Or at least I think that's why there's so many short jokes. Also, super rats. It's mentioned on the news at the start of the film and then never again. Is it supposed to be a reference to the rat catcher or something? Regardless, people are finding uncomfortable connections to the real world, which I'll discuss a little later on. Still, the fact that we're seeing this world on a much more personal level, seeing all of the dark undertones of the lands, rather than seeing it as just some fancy, distant backdrop, only makes for a more investing and guttural experience. Now, let's talk style, the actual direction portrayed in Joker. Obviously, this of all films stands out the most from anything DC has made before, as it's a standalone spin-off acting more as a detailed character study rather than a piece of a wider universe. Joker is scary, but not in the gory, action-packed way, but in its purely constant sense of unease. The film takes itself very seriously as we slowly see the almost logical decline of a man who slowly has everything kicked back in his face. But the super serious and slow style the film has only makes for super suspenseful scenes where we're afraid for the inevitable moment when Arthur Fleck finally snaps within a scene and charges in his latest outburst. You know he's gonna do something aggressive, and even if it's not something massive like blowing up a hospital, it's still incredibly worrying, regardless of the smaller scale. The film also tries to play with the narrative, subverting what you expect to be reality and playing mind games with the audience. Though for me personally, this didn't really work out, as it was pretty obvious when something was fake. Maybe it's because I watched a film theory on it beforehand and overlooked into it way too much. Yeah, MatPat, it's your fault! The only dream sequence that made me question what it was the, spoilers from this point by the way, death of Arthur's mum. I kind of suspected it was a dream because of the amount of bloom and lens flares going on in the shot, but no, that's real too. Generally, if it's happy, it's fake. Still, with the slow, psychologically focused approach to the narrative, Joaquin's acting prowess as this new Joker was all the more highlighted, be it through his crooked leaning onto sinks, his creaky turns and his dance motions, or his crooked back and sunken stomach whenever he's showing off that malnourished torso of his. Gross, but great. Right, enough of that eye candy, let's talk about the symbolism and cinematography of the Joker. Now, I've only seen this film once, and I'm not quite an Easter eggs and references channel, so I doubt I'll be talking about nearly everything, but there's still heaps of imagery that's pretty hard to miss, and great to talk about too. Take, for example, the theme of disparity from reality with those studio scenes and the color palette of the movie. Oftentimes, the streets of Gotham are painted with desaturated colors, with highlights on the dingier tones, like you'd normally expect, right? But on TV, the colors are bright, blooming, and inviting, much like the fantasy of actually being on TV would be, showing all the more how the people with such luxuries have no real connection to what's going on outside of their little bubble. Or how's about the pretty obvious one during the final shot of the film, with Joker strolling along the hallways of Arkham Asylum while leaving behind a trail of red footsteps, clearly representing the path of blood and turmoil he's left behind him. And then there's the general things like how Arthur's decline is all surrounded by the mistreatment of his mental illnesses alongside the underbelly of a dysfunctional society, or how the flickering lights of the train lines portray both Gotham's inability to uphold the city's public services, as well as Joker's mental instability as everything confronts him all at once, and he has his first killer outburst shooting his first 3 victims. And then there's that spooky dance sequence he does, first just being a fantasy scenario that ends with accidentally shooting his gun to becoming his calming coping mechanism once he's actually used it for real, and to put him in the right mindset whenever he needs to be calm and focused. Although those with a keen eye for cinematography have come to realize that this film copies a lot of the features from its inspiration from past Scorsese films, to the point that it's almost a fault, rather than a referential homage. I don't really find it problematic to the enjoyment I had with the film, but still, having such a focus on those kind of cinematic traits makes the film feel beyond just its in-depth story and expands into just being a generally amazing piece of cinema, bleeding tone and emotion in every cranny. A great home for a universe as crazy as DC's. But let's move on from most of the symbolism and let's talk about the actual characters of this film. This is a character-driven plot after all, and surprisingly enough, Joker isn't the only known named character to make an appearance. As much as I thought the Bruce Wayne appearance in the trailer was a bit too much of a ham-fisted nod, the actual connections to the Wayne family was an interesting direction for the film that I really wasn't expecting. Although clearly not the central point considering this is the Joker movie, but there is Bruce's father Thomas Wayne potentially running for mayor in this film, representing yet another rich figurehead for the people to not believe in. Plus his personal connections to Arthur make him seem like a potential biological father, only twisting up Fleck's aspirations and wants for a warm fatherly figure to look up to. Only for it to be smacked in his face again with the news that his mother is a delusional liar and that he was adopted. This version of Thomas also makes for an original reinterpretation as he seems as a semi-antagonistic character, spitting on the lies of the Flecks as well as how he can be seen as part of the problem with the rich. And though he may be a charitable man in previous incarnations, this one is just another cog in the wheel that the people reject. Or perhaps he is the man they need, but the society of Gotham simply doesn't want to listen. And then there's Arthur's mother again, originally just being the standard trope of weak old woman to get you invested in the idea of the protagonist being at least somewhat the good guy, only for it to reveal that she too is hiding some demons, with the reveal that she too has a history of mental illness, namely psychotic hallucinations and narcissism disorder, making her believe she had a relationship with Thomas Wayne when she was just disrupting him, as well as neglecting his son and allowing for him to be physically abused and facing head trauma, the exact stuff causing his incessant laughter. She's a great twist on that perfect mother trope ideal, as she too is an unreliable narrator, and it fittingly works alongside piecing together Joker's origins, as it's never been ventured before, and the mystery and redirection it has is just fantastically relevant. And then there's Murray, the celebrity idol of Arthur's dreams, and the figurehead of what's wrong with many of the rich. Starting off as someone to look up to with the power to get Arthur onto the big screen, or I guess little screen in this case, only to reveal him to be a bully that points the finger at Arthur's failures for his own comedic gain, and when confronted about it, only continues to ridicule him on live TV. It might not exactly be justified what happens because of all of this, but you can see where it's a dick move. And can I just say, as someone who's been around a lot of those kind of comedy nights, it's a pretty big no-no in general to shoot down other comedians directly, or even just to question someone's intro as a host to that comedian like that one guy did. So you can totally get how Joker never seems to get a break in this world. And it continues beyond Murray. So many of the civilians Arthur meets similarly kick him when he's down. His co-workers, the lady on the bus, kids, adults, and even his mother, no matter how unintentional. But forget all of the background characters, let's talk Joker himself. And from pretty much everyone I've heard, we've all come to the same understanding that this may be one of the best Jokers there is. Obviously, the biggest contender is Heath Ledger's rendition, and to that I say, it continues to be hard to tell, simply because this Joker is portrayed in such a different manner. They practically can't be compared. They're both fantastic in ways that are entirely their own. The way Joaquin's version has a laugh that is automatic and painful, related to his deeply ingrained mental illness, and even addressed in the main story, is outstanding, and continues to haunt viewers long after the film has ended. It's truly unhinged. Not to mention, his in-depth exploration of the character makes for an incredibly investing experience as we see him demasked as this awkward, shy kind of guy with the luck stat of a fire hydrant. His mental illness clearly disrupting his daily life and only adding more fuel to the fire at the worst of times. Not to mention, his unreliability as a narrator is exciting to see as we venture into his dreamlike fantasies of everything he wants in life, even if they're clear as day to spot. Still, if every DC character could get this kind of character study approach rather than the larger cinematic universe approach that Marvel films have capitalized on, and especially if they re-achieve these kind of levels of success and investment as Joker has, then I can particularly see DC finally being able to hold firmly on their collection of franchise films simply through the unique storytelling proceedings to make the DC universe feel like a series of true cinematic art with thought-provoking themes rather than a simple eye-catching cacophony. Still, I've got a couple more categories to talk about. One I'll touch on briefly is the soundtrack. I can't particularly remember a theme tune or a melody beyond the big name hits that were featured in the film, but that's entirely expected, as this isn't some recognizable icon of a film, and rather an uncomfortable screech of a character's descent. Much of the music is atmospheric, especially so compared to other films. Whenever Joker is stood in a room by himself with naught but a mirror and his mind to give him company, he's given a faint but screechy violin in the background to reflect his unhinged mindset as he comes to terms with his thoughts and the scenario around him. And when he finally clicks, storming to his next victim or running into action, out plays this perturbing drum beat made from a much more metallic material than normal, further highlighting the unwellness of the Joker during these moments and making it seem like an aggressive attack on the musical underscore. And these two features are most of what the film really needs to really get into the head of this twisted Joker. Okay, so all these pieces sound pretty good, but how is the actual story? Well, I think everyone can agree it's pretty intense and investing the whole way through as you slowly see just how a society like Gotham's can spit out a man like Joker. Many of the story beats are easy to see coming. If Arthur's on the decline, of course he's gonna lose his job, and of course he's gonna be confronted, and sure, of course his mother's gonna be lost too, though maybe not in the way you'd expect. What did truly put me through a loop was the twists on Arthur's childhood and how it was intertwined with the Waynes, at least briefly. Having an explanatory cause for his mental illness was fascinating to see explored and only made his spiral seem more and more understandable. And perhaps that's one of the most disturbing parts of the film. You see Joker doing all of these horrible things, and yet, knowing his whole background, you can look at it and say, yeah, I get it. The deaths of the three rich boys became topic for debate both in the public in Gotham as well as in our heads too, as we saw them as yet more scum with the pocket to stamp on the underprivileged. Though fictional deaths do play to this concept a lot too, villainizing them before their fate. The dream sequences, though unsubversive to me, did include subtle hints to their fictitious nature, like how Joker's romantic interest somehow knew his name despite never mentioning it in the elevator scene they met in. I appreciate that. And the ending really had me pumped up and excited. Yeah, sure, it was predictable that Joker would end up shooting Murray on live TV, but I was expecting it to end on the TV screens of his speech and the neighboring riots on the news. And then I thought it would end with him being driven away amidst the protests. And then I thought it would end on the reveal of the Joker protests being the indirect cause of the death of Bruce Wayne's parents in that alleyway, which, by the way, is just awesome to see. And though it's yet another Batman origin story, I just love how it all linked into the story. But the final ending point was of course in Arkham Asylum, where ironically enough, Joker finally seemed the most happiest, achieving a purpose and feeling somewhat free. My only real qualm was the predictable beats and Bruce Wayne's non-emotive reaction to the death of his parents, but it's a minor thing. And so we reach our final little point, the wider context of the film. Many of the statements within this film, as well as the world itself, disturbingly can be seen as a reflection of our modern day reality. With the political climate heating up once again, people taking to the streets in protest, and the whole depiction of similarities with clown culture. And while many people take this as disrespectful, preachy, or even glorifying violence in an endangering manner, I disagree. at the end of the day, this is the world of Gotham. This simply is how it always has been. The fact that it reflects reality now is just a scary point of this is what could be the worst case scenario, and it certainly isn't starting a negative epidemic, though most of these hot takes were created before the film actually came out. Though it is breaking records above Venom for October opening successes. Clearly, it's a cinematic hit both with viewers and critics, earning all sorts of awards already and will likely go down as one of DC's greatest. Not to mention, some of its commentaries have some strong and well-received points, from the little discussions of the subjective nature of comedy and how it can be perceived, to the more hard-hitting points of mental illness in our modern society, with Arthur even scribbling down that the worst thing about having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't. And while it's disturbing that you can almost kinda side with Joker in this harsh world, this is a Joker film told from his perspective. It makes sense that some may perceive it that way, as does most films with a protagonist and an ideal. And when it comes to the idea of sequels, while it may not be a direct plan, it could be twisted into place with the massive success of this film. It already feels like the build-up to something bigger, and the world of Gotham remains to have many of its issues unsolved and merely burned hotter than ever. Be it through a Batman sequel, another Joker plot, or simply someone inspired by the movement as a whole, it's clear with this kind of style and succinct storytelling, DC suddenly has a lot of fuel to run with for any future franchises they may be planning on producing. I just only hope that they can truly achieve to hit this massive landmark of a piece of cinema once again. I guess we'll see if this next era is truly in DC's favor. For now, my name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. Whew. Joker was really good, guys. My god. And if you have any feedback on the formatting of this video, do let me know. I'll tweak it in the future.